Hello, seekers of self, students of the real you, brave enactors of your authentic self. I'm Grant Faulkner, a man who has been pursuing his real self since he thought he truly nailed it when he was 18. But I was wrong. Turns out my real self is quite slippery and likes to squirm around and even run away. And I'm here with my co-host, Brooke Warner, who has always seemed like the very grounded person to me and who knows herself well. Yet I also know that Brooke has gone through at least a few different versions of the current Brooke. So, Brooke, I want to know, is that accurate, or have you known your true and real self throughout it all? Or how do you even think about identifying and being your real self?
I like that, versions of the current Brooke. I'll have to sleep on that one. But, the whole thing is very existential. I'm going to answer by saying yes. I feel like I've been my true self throughout it all. At the same time, I think we all have iterations of who our self is at a different point in our lives. I'm struck by how different I am now from when I was young. I feel that. Obviously, it's not just physical, it's like my belief systems and how I am in the world too. And so I'm like the same but different. And then sometimes I also think about how a particular choice not made would have impacted who I would have become versus who I have become. And then I think a lot about the impact of circumstances, of course, on all of our lives. Like you might become a different person because of a loss or a trauma. You might strike it rich and move to a mansion and separate yourself from suffering, and then you become a certain kind of person. We certainly see that in the world. So all of that, is what comes to mind, of course, when you ask that question, because I can't imagine being anyone else other than who I am. But I also can imagine that life circumstances could have pushed me to be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So, Grant, there you have it. You've brought me to a very philosophical place.
Me too. While I'm listening to you, I want to meet all the Grants and all these multiverses,
Yeah,
especially
we'll
the
meet
ones
on
where
different planes.
where I have a mansion.
No, you don't want to be that person in your
Probably
ivory
not.
tower.
Probably not. But I could at least go for a few household appliances that work. Yeah. Well, this question's on my mind because it's a very dominant theme in Roz Hernandez's new memoir, "Peeing in an Empty Bottle." A great title for memoir, by the way, and we're going to dig into that in our interview. And I think it's really the dominant themes in all of our lives when I think about it. Not only who we are, but how do we be who we are, and what costs are we willing to take in order to be who we are, and what are the benefits of embracing our true self? There's just so many questions about it, as you rose. And I love Greek literature, and it's the Greek oracle's message, just to know thyself, a simple two words that are quite complex. And I read that when I was 18, and that was when I thought I figured it out. And it's a great power to know yourself, I think, in all regards. When you feel a solidity of self, you can be more bold and more you, both on the page and obviously in life. And you gain confidence because your self-knowledge is a type of bedrock, I think, that makes you stronger. So Roz's whole story is organized around that question, from the 10-year-old boy who dressed as Rainbow the Clown and made it all the way to a burning Burger King parking lot for a special performance before refusing to go in, to the 6'1" transgender woman driving a rental car across America in 2025, booking comedy shows at gay bars. And the distance between those two people is the memoir.
Yeah, which is really profound. We talk about this idea of like you have to have transformation and memoir, and this is like ultimate and actual physical transformation. And the Burger King scene is so sad because she, who is then a little boy, is there in a full clown makeup, sitting in the back seat. Like the pronoun thing is a little difficult because when you go back in time, like at the time he was a boy, so back seat while his mom is trying to talk him into going in, and he just can't, because as the little boy he's been bullied at school, and the local newspaper even ran a story about him and his dad being a clown duo, and then suddenly the very thing that gave him permission to be himself in public, the makeup, the performance, the character, felt like a target. And so Roz, the author, describes this as the moment when she vowed to herself that she would never let the world see her be herself. only 10 years old. And, it's very relatable. Like these moments, like I was saying, these profound traumas. And then she spent the next 14 years keeping it all a secret, becoming an alcoholic, a drug user to cope with all the things. And then she got sober at 20 something and made a new vow. And that vow was fuck being normal. It's time to be me. And you can feel that in her interview, I think,
Yeah.
and it's an extraordinary thing to say and even more extraordinary to do, especially when you're trans because of how the world treats trans people. And we're certainly going to get into that now. I mean, I just was so struck by Roz saying like her very existence makes people angry.
Yeah, so many different layers to our interview and discussion with her, and what's interesting to me is the question of what me even is, because Roz, as you mentioned, went from a boy to drag queen to trans woman, and those aren't just identity stages; they're also performing stages. And she talks about how drag is all artifice, the wig, the name, the fake breasts, the doing stand up as a full drag queen. It just felt wrong to her because audiences thought she was telling personal stories while wearing a costume that wasn't exactly her. So she stepped away from the persona and grew out her own hair and became the real Roz, and then discovered that being the real Roz in the wrong room was also a kind of performance because she was constantly educating people and managing their discomfort and earning the right to be there. And I obviously haven't experienced anything like this since I'm a straight white male, and the world has basically been set up for my comfort in my lifetime, which is why I was interested in this dramatic moment in the memoir, which I'll call the Jay Leno problem. And there's this fascinating passage in the introduction where she talks about Jay Leno giving advice to a whole group of open mic comedians at the Hollywood Improv, including her. And at that time, she was an addict, living in her car, working the door for minimum wage. And he told them all to go perform for audiences where they might bomb, and then to go back until they win them over, performing for everybody, appealing to the widest possible range of people. And she took that advice for a while. This advice also, I think, really applies to people as writers to think about and reckon with. But then she realized that's great advice if you want to become Jay Leno. She recognizes there's no way she will ever be a comedian like Jay Leno who appeals to the masses. And so she accepted that. And I actually wonder when I heard that story if Jay Leno knows who the real Jay Leno is, since the real Jay Leno is trying to please the greatest number of people. And perhaps that's why I've never particularly liked his comedy. It kind of lacks bite or true personality. It is for everybody, so it's very sanitized.
Oh gosh, and talk about like the epitome of privilege, to
Yeah.
be like, just do this without thinking about the ways in which it would impact someone like Roz, who is like, I clearly can't do that because, my very existence is offensive to some people. And, so then coming to that acceptance is really so much of the book and actually so much of our interview, which I so appreciate. And, I do want to note that a big part of the memoir's momentum is created in that it's centered in a 46 city 50 show tour of an LGBTQ plus series of venues across America that she launched on impulse in February of 2025, just as Trump was beginning his second term, just as the cultural climate for trans people was really getting dark fast. And Roz was a 12-year comedy veteran and podcast host, and she had posted on Instagram basically asking queer bars across America to tag her, and then within minutes the responses were flooding in. So the memoir is about that. It's a road trip, it's queer ethnography, it's meditation on what it means to be visible when visibility is dangerous. It's just really a great construct for a book. And then the road trip and the memoir are building towards something that is truly unapologetic for her people, going to gay bars, queer venues, all across America. And it's not because she can't make it in comedy clubs, by the way, but really because she doesn't want to win over people that aren't into what she is doing. And so I just love that. She is done earning her place in the wrong room. And so, sorry, but not sorry, Jay Leno.
I think, yes. I love the Jay Leno bashing that we're doing here. I've been waiting for this for a long
Jay.
time.
Well, he's going to get back to us clearly.
I can go further. Let's have Jay Leno write a memoir, and then we'll invite him on and ask him some of these questions. It's really the perfect memoir for us, two road trippers, Brooke, to have this road trip as a personal story. And there's a line in the conclusion that I keep thinking about where she says, I may not be rich in money, but I am rich in jokes, and to not share my riches with those starved for a smile is evil, in my opinion. I just love that as a statement about why you tell your story and what art is for. And I think all of us who are creating things like memoirs need to remind ourselves that a big part of our wealth, is actually our stories and unearthing them and shaping them and then giving them to both ourselves and others.
I love that, Grant. We should all hang up that quote over our desks. It is very powerful. I may not be rich in money, but I am rich in jokes. And to not share my riches with those starved for a smile is evil, in my opinion. I could live by that. And Grant, you earlier mentioned the Greek oracles, know thyself. And you've said it before in previous episodes. And I do think that it needs a footnote in that you're never finished knowing thyself. It's kind of where I was going with the opening question. Like if you start to spiral down into it, you're like, wow, there's multiple iterations of who we are in this life, and the real you is never finished. And memoir, in general is kind of proof of that. I think we get into it to excavate who we've been and who we're becoming and who we will be. And Roz herself doesn't arrive at some stable, resolved identity at the end of her book. She has gained 40 pounds from stress eating during the tour. She's peeing in the aforementioned water bottle. She is reaching for a swig on the drive home. ... We're not going to tell the ending of the book. You'll have to read it. But it's unresolved and it's completely her. And so, 46 cities, 50 shows, as she said in the conclusion, like somehow she even got more transgender. And I love that so much.
Yeah, me too. It's somehow I got even more transgender. It's just beautifully put, and that's what happens when you stop performing for the wrong audience and start performing for your own people. You don't just give them something; they give you something back at the same time when you're the real you. And they kind of help show you what and who you actually are. And that I think is what, building a fabulous life actually means for Roz. It's not wealth, not mainstream fame, not a network TV deal. It's getting to be a fabulous woman and having people embrace everything about her that she was told made her wrong. So here's to finding that version of the real me. And that's something I hope our listeners achieve, finding the right audience where you feel you belong.
Yeah, that is a powerful one to think about. There is so much here that is translatable about just we can only be for the people that are going to be excited about what we are bringing to the page. On that note, let's bring on Roz Hernandez after this very short break. So much insight in this interview. So excited to have her on. Just stay on for the little musical interlude and we will be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. I am excited to introduce Roz Hernandez, who is a transgender comedian based in Los Angeles. In 2023, she starred in an 8-episode TV series on Hulu called Living for the Dead with Kristen Stewart. In 2024, New York Magazine's Vulture named her one of the comedians you should and will know. She was the opening act for Bob the Drag Queen's U.S. tour. Apple Podcasts named her comedy podcast Ghosted by Roz Hernandez their pick of the month. And she was featured in the Netflix documentary about LGBTQ stand-up called Outstanding, a comedy revolution. Out, all in caps. Welcome, Roz.
Hey.
So happy to have you here. And your memoir opens with you sitting in your car outside a comedy club in LA, eating a Taco Bell cheesy bean and rice burrito from the dollar menu and not wanting to
You're making me
go
hungry.
in. I know.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound good? Except for everything that's happening to Taco Bell today with their lettuce. Otherwise, great.
Right.
But that image, sets the whole emotional register of the book, funny and brave and slightly absurd, but deeply real at the same time. And so I'm just curious, because I've been thinking about the beginnings of books. When you sat down to write the book, why did you decide to start there?
Well, the way that this project went was I wasn't thinking about it as a book to begin with at all. Like I actually a couple months into it was like, maybe I should record. Well, a couple months into the process of putting together this tour, which is what the book is, centered around, I was like, maybe I should record this and do some kind of project with it. But originally, I I couldn't, I wasn't living like, oh, I need to write all these, write everything down that I'm doing. So when I went back to start writing it as an audiobook, I was thinking of the moments that were kind of the catalyst for the tour, and just these moments of me looking at what the world was becoming at the beginning of 2025, and my comedy career, and where am I taking it, and why is this so scary and frustrating right now. And um I just thought that that was kind of like a perfect moment. Looking back, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it felt like, and that moment, just sitting there with my Taco Bell and being like, I don't want to go in this club, I don't feel like talking to these people.
Mm. Well, let's move on to the comedy, because there's the Jay Leno advice: go perform for everyone, appeal to everyone, win every room. And then your conclusion is, that's great advice if you want to become Jay Leno, and I will never be Jay Leno, and I finally accepted that, something along those lines. So can you share more about that realization? And really, it's a form of acceptance, but I'd love to hear you kind of, how you came to that.
Yeah, I do find that acceptance is really a big a big thing for me, and just being like, you know what? Where I'm at in this world, where I belong in America, um I'm not I'm not happy about it, but also I'm going to make the most of where I'm at, and the way that transgender people are viewed in media right now. But I have finally, I've had to accept that I am trans, and I'm not going to be appealing to the masses of America right now. Like, it's just very clear that somebody like me, I mean, I get met with people just furious about me, just so mad about me before. Like, there'll be times when it's like I haven't even opened my mouth. Like, there will just be like a picture of me in an article that'll be like transgender comedian, and then everyone will be like, that's a man. Like, it's just all these people that are just so mad, furious. And it's like, well, yeah, they're not going to give me opportunities um for the masses in showbiz right now. And okay, then I'm gonna go find my own uh opportunities.
Hmm. It really struck me, the Jay Leno advice, that wasn't going to lead you to your real self either, or your real power. And I'm interested in this intersection of performance and your own personal feeling of who you are and how that is expressed in your performance. And you went from being an addict, living in your car, to doing stand up at the Hollywood Improv, to being a drag queen, to trans woman, to this tour. And those aren't just life stages, each one involves a different relationship to performance and identity. So when did you first feel like the person performing was actually you? And was there a specific moment when the stage version of the real version of you finally kind of merged? I know somebody who identifies a moment when that happened for him, and I'm always interested in that moment.
Oh, interesting. Well, I definitely think um yeah, once I started doing stand up not as a drag queen, and I started to be able to talk about real life a little bit more, and I felt like people were kind of like listening to me as a human, not as like a character, I don't know if I can pinpoint like a specific moment. I feel like I could pinpoint that moment with this tour, with being like, okay, this is working. Like, I definitely, because that's the thing, is like I've done stand up for, I think now it's like 13 or 14 years or something. And I've done it in a variety of different places, and I've definitely done it in gay bars, which is what this tour was. Um but never like this, where I was like a touring headlining comedian. Oh, this person's coming to town, buy your tickets. Like I never really did it that way. And it was a risk, and I wasn't really sure if it was going to work or not. But um, I had hopes for what it would be and what it would feel like, and how it would work. But a lot of the venues I went to, I had to explain to them like what a comedy show entails, and um, they had no clue what I was pitching to them. And I'm so grateful that they took the risk, because a lot of them, I mean, a lot of places said absolutely not, like, no, we don't do that, no. But most of the places I went to don't do comedy shows, so they were taking a risk and they opened their minds, and it worked. And I remember just like a few into the tour being like, oh my God, this is like so much better than a comedy club. Sorry, but it's so much better and so much more fun, at least for me. Like it was just like a more fun vibe. And yeah, that was cool.
It's very cool because you did something super grassroots, like starting from the very beginning, because we do want to tell our listeners who will have to read the book that you launched this whole thing from an Instagram post, and you published it basically 15 minutes after you had the idea to do it. And you thought that you would be more accountable if you put it out publicly, which is a good way also to write a book or to do anything really big. And so I thought I would ask about accountability. I mean, is that a thing? Like, are you a person who has to make public your accountability? And any advice you have, like, yes, do it, or was there anything that backfired?
God, well, yeah, being my own boss, I'm really bad. Like I need that. I need the people to be like, wait a minute, you said you're gonna do this. And it's very easy to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna do a tour, and then like 5 months later, it's like, what happened to that tour? Oh shoot, I got busy. I completely forgot. Like, so I'm just like, I want to do this, and also I was desperate. I needed work last year. Like there was just like nothing going on, and there's no more commercials, or I'm not auditioning the way that I used to. Like there's just like nothing. So I'm like, okay, I need to find work. And I had the idea and I just posted about it. And I think it's good for me to be held accountable in that way.
I love that. Both the impulsivity behind that, I guess, just the kind of improv, the yes and of going forward, especially like just that you posted it on Instagram and then stuff started happening. And I do think, like Brooke said, that's sometimes like the perfect moment of creation when you just feel it and you do it. And that's how this podcast actually came to be pretty much 8 years
Oh
ago.
yeah.
And yeah, and so I love how the intersection of just say yes and desperation combines to make a great creative act.
Well, and that's kind of what uh it was so hard to come up with a title for this book, because I was just like, how do I do like a title that's like it's a road trip, but it's also a gay bar thing, but it's also a trans thing, and it's a comedian, and it's a tour. Like it was just so many things. And then when I thought of the title Peeing in an Empty Bottle, which is something I had to do, um I'm like, it's kind of a metaphor for the desperation and finding a solution, that by grabbing whatever's closest by you and just hoping for the best.
That's a good metaphor for writing, definitely. Well, we had the comedian Jeff Hiller on the podcast, not long ago,
Love
maybe about a year
him.
ago. Yeah, we love him too, and he talked really beautifully about how LGBTQ plus people find community in unexpected places, which is what his TV show was also about. But finding it in small towns and in unlikely venues, and in pockets of belonging that you just wouldn't predict from the outside. And you experienced a version of this across 46 cities, which is just such a heroic undertaking just to get there. And so, what did you discover about queer community in America that you didn't know before you left, and what surprised you the most?
You know, I really I really wish I had a good answer for that, because there, like, truthfully, like, I know that there's my philosophy with safety with doing this tour, because there's a lot of cities I didn't want to go to throughout the years, because I'm like, I can't do a comedy club in Alabama and like hope that my people show up or whatever. Like, I just can't do that. So I thought if I did it at gay bars, um, at least I'll feel safe with that being the venue and the clientele. Um, and so I started to think like, well, if there's a gay bar in the anywhere, then I'm safe if I'm in that building. So I I kind of was just hoping, but I don't know. Just, I mean, I'm like, if a business is able to stay in business, if even if it's in the middle of nowhere, there must be people that go to it. So I just kind of thought wherever I go, I'll find the LGBT people, um and then when I was in these places, I would have long stretches of travel by myself, driving or being in hotel rooms, and I'm so lonely. And then as soon as I show up, I'm like, oh, people that can like understand me. I can like, even the staff of the place or whatever. I'm just like, oh, please just stay in the dressing room with me and let's talk. There's so much that we can relate on, um, and so I kind of knew, and it helps in the age of the internet, where it's like we just kind of we have a shorthand, or like, we have a way of talking about certain things. And so it was just nice to feel it in person in various places. I guess just slightly different accents every time.
Good way to put it.
I bet. Well, I want to ask you about one of the figures in your book who's very moving, Mia, Uncle Mia, 67-year-old Black trans woman at Stacy's who's been performing since 1981 and talks about wanting to connect gay people with gay businesses, who said, I'm trying to connect gay people with gay people because of the way society is set up. And you write that you find it instrumental as a queer person to spend as much time with queer and trans elders as possible, which it was just very moving. So what did spending time with people like Mia and other veterans on this tour teach you about what survival actually looks like?
Yeah, that you're talking about Mia Inez Adams is her name. She's spectacular. Um, I mean, I just always love my elders. I'm always like, tell me a story. What were the 90s like? I like to hear about the the part of history that I'm hopefully contributing to. I want to know about it before I was a part of it. I always want to know, whether it's drag or comedy or stand up or um, transness. Like, I just want to know what it was like for other people, and what they can, what kind of little tidbits they can offer me as I move forward. And there were several trans performers that were veterans that I got to sit down with throughout the the process of this audiobook. And um I don't know, I find it so important, because people don't listen to trans people very often. It feels like people talk about trans people all the time. They don't actually give trans people an opportunity to talk often. um and a question that I always have for older trans people is like, how do you compare before to now? Like, how do you compare like the 80s or 90s to now as a trans person? And both had their struggles, but in previous decades, it wasn't really something that people talked about as much. And now it's like on the forefront. It's like people are talking about it nonstop and it's always negative. And um I find it really interesting, these people that are survivors that have been trans this whole time and have seen multiple sides to it. And um I think for a very long time they were especially not seen. They were people that were pushed into the shadows, and they've gathered a lot of wisdom. I think sometimes in the shadows and in the closets is where you're observing, and picking up on things that everyone else might not be because they're too busy living their lives. And I find I find trans women very wise.
Thank you for that, Roz. That was so interesting. And you told us about the title earlier, and I still find it to be one of the most arresting and compelling and intriguing titles of a book that I've ever seen, and I love it. I also love that you don't really know throughout the book. There's some suspense, like why this title, until the very end. And it comes at the last scene of the book, and you're peeing in a water bottle backstage at the Cavern Club Theater in the basement of Casita de Campo. And that was the place where you got sober, where you found your comedy community, where you got your name, and then reaching for what you thought was a water.
Now don't ruin it.
Okay, don't ruin it. I'll
No
stop there.
spoilers.
I'll stop
Well,
there
there was
because
a couple of times that I peed in an empty bottle because there was a time in the middle of the book where I did it in a rental car and I didn't do a very good job. I'll just say that.
well, I think it's a perfect ending, because it's deeply uncomfortable and funny and exactly right in that moment. So can you tell us more about the title? Maybe you talked about it as a metaphor for your
Right.
book and the perfect like kind of image, but if you go dig down into it a little bit more and tell us some details about that, I guess without letting the punchline go.
Sure,
But
sure. Well, I really wanted to get across to people, like, if you have a dream, go for it. And you you know, I don't have a ton of money. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a team. I don't have a tour bus. But I want a tour. And so there's certain things that I have to do to survive. And this tour included me, footing the bill for rental cars and all of my gas and driving myself places and then putting myself up in hotels and hoping people showed up to my shows. And it was not glamorous, but when I'm on stage it's glamorous. And I want people to see, like, okay, the world is against trans people right now. The industry of show business is, who knows what's going on. Um, but I need to work, and so this is what it entails. And I tried to be as honest as possible about just how unglamorous it is, but I'm doing it because it's my passion and because I want to make my people laugh. And I want people that need a laugh to have that opportunity to just turn off the news for 2 hours or whatever it is and just be with their community and laugh. And I'll drive across the country to do that, and I'll pee in an empty bottle if I have to, as the bathrooms are terrifying throughout America right now as a trans person. And so, yeah, I'll figure it out. Nothing's gonna stop me.
There's the anthem right there.
yeah.
I mean, thank you for saying, all the things that we already know, of course, that things are terrible in general, but specifically for trans people. And, here we are in Trump's second term, all the anti-trans legislation, all this stuff where visibility itself is scary. And so I wanted to just home in on this a little bit, because people are essentially saying to you throughout, like, be safe. And then you're saying, well, okay, like, to quote your words, I'm going to gay bars, not Klan rallies, and I refuse to let Hollywood elites or anxious well-wishers define what's possible for me. So it's an extension of what you're saying. And yet that also requires a lot of defiance, I think. I mean, maybe it's just a lot of different emotions and resilience and perseverance and a million other things. But I did kind of want to ask you about that defiance, and if you felt that that was true, and did it sustain you for the journey, or was there something else that you might point to in terms of a quality inside of you?
Oh God, this one. I mean, this I was so annoyed because I saw a "be safe" comment this morning, actually. Um, and it's like I know where it comes from. I understand. Um, it's almost always not trans people. Um, so I don't know. There's a quality to that when people say it to me where I'm like, do you not think I know what I am in this world? Do you think that I truly am not aware of what's going on around me? Do you really think I don't know I have to look around my shoulder all the time? Like, I know. You're not like, "Oh, this dumb trans person doesn't know. I need to make sure they know that people don't like them, so be careful." It like really pisses me off. But I know that's not their intention. I know that they're just trying to be, whatever, sweet, look out for me, whatever. So it just kind of like upsets me because I'm like, I live this life. I have to sit with this all the time. And I'm also a person with dreams. And I'm somebody that, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are people I do comedy with or started with or whatever, that they don't have the same problems that I have to deal with. I don't have the same problems they have to deal with, but they, they're able to chase their dreams in a different way. I have to do it this way. I'm just sort of trying to figure out how to do it my way, with the circumstances that we are given right now, and um, I just kind of feel like it's not helpful. It's like, everyone just don't worry about me, okay? It always kind of also feels like a little bit of like, I told her. I told her she shouldn't have done it. Like, it's like they want to do a "I told you so" or something. And it's like, this isn't helping. It's not actually helping. I know to be safe. I'm not stupid.
Well, it's like a platitude too. I mean, that's what I always think. I mean, some people clearly do want you to be safe, but it's like, yeah, then how am I meant to make myself safe? I mean, you could almost do a whole second book about that, or a comedy routine, because it's very loaded.
It's very, and I talk about it quite a bit throughout the audiobook. Just like, I wanted to also be honest about that, about like how I have to maneuver. Um, but
Yeah.
I, I'm not walking down dark alleys. Okay. I know certain things not to do, but at the same time, I can't just sit in my apartment. Okay. I have to make money. I've got things to do. I've got a purpose in life, and I feel that I deserve, just like everybody else, to live my life to my fullest. And I can't control how other people are going to react to that, but I'm not going to completely let it stop me.
It's a kind of interesting segue to our last question here. And the conclusion of the book, it ends with this, you're not doing it for the little boy in the backseat of the Burger King parking lot anymore. like one of the beginning stories that you tell about. But you're doing
Yes, me. I was the little boy, by the way, not just some random little boy.
Yeah,
It was
you were the
me.
little boy. Listeners know that Roz was a little boy. There's not another little boy. Good. But you're doing it. You're very forward looking. You're not looking so much in the back in the rearview mirror, because you're doing it for the transgender woman in the front seat of a rental trying to pee into an empty bottle. And it's just like a remarkable reframe, I think. Not necessarily about healing your childhood self per se, resolving the past, but really claiming your present self in whatever messiness or uncomfortableness there is in that. And your present self is the one worth fighting for. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that assertion at the end.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of it is acceptance and just sort of saying, I think I say towards the end, like, if this is the best it gets, I'm fine with it. Like, I really do love my life. It's not what I thought it was going to be at all, in like a million different ways. Even just being a transgender lady comedian, which I didn't know was even possible growing up. Um, I certainly, once I was like, okay, I'm going to be a comedian, I didn't think I was going to be driving myself to gay bars across America. Like, I didn't think it was going to be that. But I'm like, this is what I've always dreamed of. This is what my dream was to be creative and to entertain people and to be able to be myself and find people that also are accepting of me, and they themselves are living their own unique life. And I like being around colors and patterns, and I don't know, I like the color of life, and I don't want to live in a box. And I feel like growing up, I forced myself into a box, and it didn't work for me. It led me to addiction, and it led me to depression, and I just didn't get to live my life to the fullest, and I want to live it to the fullest. And I think that that's sort of, as I look at the future, which I have no clue what any of it, none of us do. I don't know. Will AI just completely take over everything? Will there be, will we all have diarrhea till we die? I don't know. But in the meantime, I'm going to make the most of it.
I love how acceptance is a type of superpower for you. I've never thought of it that
Yeah.
way, but it's wonderful. So thank you so much,
Well,
Roz.
yeah, because you accept, and then you go, okay, well, here's the circumstances. How do I make the most of these circumstances? And I think that's important for me. I work best with, like, if there's guidelines or something. Like, if someone's like, tell us a joke, I'm like, about what? Like, give me a topic, and then I need like a guide. I need the guidelines. And so sometimes with life, I go, okay, here's the parameters, because this is what I need to accept, what I can and will not be able to do right now. I'm probably not going to get a Netflix special right now, but what can I do with where I'm at right now? And that's what I've tried to figure out.
Oh, we'll be rooting for that Netflix special for you, Roz, and you're awesome. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for letting me talk about it.
I'll never look at a water bottle the same way, Roz. Thank you so much. Well, Brooke, I want to talk about a New Yorker piece that came out last week that I have not been able to stop thinking about. And the article's called "The Rise of the As Seen on TikTok Sticker," which was written by Brady Brickner Wood. And it's behind a paywall, but the excerpts circulating on the internet are enough to make any writer feel a little queasy. And the premise is about those, the promotional stickers that sometimes publishers put on book covers. And the argument is essentially that the sticker used to mean a book had been discovered in a very good way, but now it means that the book was designed to be discovered. So there's a difference there.
Yeah, I also noted this article, especially because another hot button article on the demise of reading came out in The Atlantic recently, and it created a complimentary stir, you might say. And the distinction between a book being discovered organically and one being designed to be discovered does matter, because what that writer is saying, Brickner Wood, basically they're talking about the difference between a book finding its readers because somebody loved it, told their friend, it spread, versus a book being engineered from the start to go viral on a platform, which is definitely something that certain publishers really try to do. Then what you end up with, Grant, of course, is like tropes, and the cover looks a certain way and the premise looks a certain way. It's all optimized for a 60-second video. And what he finds when he looks at book talk is that literary quality has essentially become irrelevant, which hurts my heart to say that out loud. There's a direct quote that's been circulating everywhere online, the one where he says that a book being cringe, flat and formulaic, or written like an 11-year-old is not at all an impediment to a book talk recommendation, as long as it hits the emotional beats its genre promises. And so, I don't know. This is once again, we're in a downer kind of trend again today, Grant.
But we're going to find hope at the end, Brooke. I promise you. We're going to dig
there.
deep. We're going to get there.
Take a breath.
Yeah, because that's a very damning sentence. And, it all connects to something else in the piece that I think is maybe the sharpest observation. The idea that on Book Talk, the social dimension of reading has become more important than the private one. So the sticker doesn't say, this is a good book. It says, this book was seen. And being seen on social media is itself the credential.
Right. And says so much about our world right now. And I do want to provide a counterpoint to that, again, like searching for the hope, because books have always been social objects. Book clubs exist, of course. People have always recommended books to friends. And so the question is, what happens when the social dimension becomes so dominant that it eclipses everything else? And when the conversation about the book replaces the experience of actually reading it, which, there's book culture, right?
Yeah, this actually reminds me of a farcical podcast I once wanted to create. The premise of it was to review things without experiencing them, because so many people do that with the internet. They just pick up a vibe and then offer a verdict without even like watching the film. And I think it's a strange coincidence that the piece is landing alongside this broader panic created by the Atlantic's recent cover story called "The End of Reading is Here," which documents how the proportion of Americans who read for pleasure, it's actually fallen from 28% to 16% in less than 20 years. And gambling is now actually more common leisure activity than reading a book. And that's a sentence I had to read twice, but it sort of makes sense to me given all the gambling ads I see around.
Right. Well, yeah, the natural response to both of the pieces is despair, but I do think it's important to push back, because for as long as I can remember, we have been bemoaning the end of reading and the end of the book, and people, of course, still read. The book is still of huge cultural relevance and importance. And what Book Talk actually demonstrates, even at its most cynical, is that there is a genuine, enormous, hungry audience of readers out there. I mean, 220 billion TikTok views under the Book Talk hashtag is pretty incredible. And so, whatever these people are doing, they do not hate reading. They're eager to talk about books and to share the experience of reading and to feel less alone. And they're doing that through stories. And I think through, like I was saying earlier, book culture. And I think that's a reframe really worth considering when we're all freaking out about the fact that nobody reads anymore.
Yeah, I used to joke, or I still joke, that publications like The Atlantic, they basically plan to schedule the book or the novel is dead feature every 5 years.
Yep.
They can just schedule it out there, and it's a guaranteed way to stir things up. And I think what writers and readers have to reckon with is the platform, or at least the incentive structure the platform creates. What that means for writers is that building an authentic readership is the answer, and not to compete with Book Talk on its own terms. The answer is to offer what Book Talk cannot do, which is depth and the private experience and the relationship between a reader and a book that happens in silence and changes something in them, to focus on the writing, in other words. So I think that goal of building a writer to reader relationship, that's not mediated by an algorithm, is why we keep coming back to, authors, if they're developing an author platform, is to think about the newsletter, the podcast, the community, the forums where the social dimension and the private dimension can actually coexist.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I was thinking like, well, it's 2026. It's time to do the death of the book.
Yeah.
Um, and so
And then
I
one more,
totally,
and then in 2031 again.
exactly. I totally agree with you. And, these writers who are building durable readerships, they're not chasing that sticker. They're the ones who have found their people. They're going deeper with them. I mean, Kiese Lehman comes to mind for me because Heavy came out in 2018 on Scribner. Not a major publisher, mid-size advanced. It didn't go viral. It didn't have a celebrity endorsement or a book talk moment, but it had this like slow readership, and you started hearing about it because it was wonderful. Like readers saw it and recommended it. And those are the kinds of books that I see a lot, like my community is reading them and then they start to go viral in their own way. Like, oh my gosh, have you read that? And I was one of those readers, and that was ultimately why and how Kiese came on our show. And so 5 years later, Heavy is considered one of the most essential American memoirs of the decade. So that's another way to do it.
Yeah, and Lewis Hyde, I'm thinking of him, who wrote The Gift, and he'd say that the book that was engineered to go viral, he makes this distinction. He calls that a commodity, a product, and the book that finds its reader because it was, is genuinely true. That's a gift. And a gift, as he puts it, moves and keeps moving. And that's the things algorithms can't really replicate. A book that someone hands to a friend and says, you need to read this, not because it trended, but because it mattered.
Yeah, I really love that distinction. And, readership is worth building. That's the thing, not just trying to like passing by and grabbing for it. It's like it really takes effort. And that is what we are here for, folks. For those of you who have been listening to our show for more than a year or even more than 2 years, you might remember that we spend the month of August revisiting our favorite shows. And so we match up 2 episodes that have some sort of point of commonality, either on topic or guest, and we kind of choose and put them together. And so that's going to start up next week and run through August. And then in September, Grant, if you can believe it, year 9 of this podcast.
Year 9, we're ready for you, listeners. So I hope you're ready for us.
Yes, I hope that you're ready for us too, listeners. But I do want to ask you for a couple of things. Grant is cracking me up. Rate the show, give us a review, come see what we're up to at Memoir Nation if you haven't already. We are doing a lot of memoir related stuff. We're looking forward to doing that memoir related stuff with you. So we'll be back, every week in August with the mashups, and then in September for a whole new season. So thanks, everyone.